A step forward. After 6 years, Cabrini finally gained acceptance into the order. She thought that milestone would put her one step closer to achieving her dream of serving in China. But she was to experience many additional setbacks. Both of her parents died within a year. Then she was assigned to teach at a local school rather than one overseas. When she applied to other organizations devoted to working in Asia, she was rejected. Soon, she was assigned to oversee a small orphanage in Kodogno, a town not more than 50 miles from home. She spent 6 frustrating years there before the orphanage was closed down. When she still dreamed of traveling to Asia, a superior told her that if she wanted to be part of a missionary order, she should start one herself. So that's what she did. With the assistance of a half a dozen girls at the orphanage, she founded the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart in 1880. During the next 8 years, she built the order, establishing foundations in Milan, Rome, and other Italian cities. She tried to earn a place in Asia, but Pope Leo VIII put an end to Cabrini's dream in ministering in China. He told her, "Not to the east, but to the west. You will find a vast field of labor in the United States." She was to help run an orphanage, school, and convent in New York City. A trip west. That is how Sister Frances Cabrini came to be at Ellis Island in March 1889. Her lifelong dream of serving in Asia lay in ruins behind her in Italy, the only home she'd ever known. But she didn't look back. She was not someone to allow the past to hold her hostage. Over the next 28 years, she dedicated herself to the task of ministering to people in the Americas, and she overcame plenty of obstacles to do it. When she arrived in New York, she was told that the plans for the orphanage, school, and convent had fallen through, and that she should return to Italy. Instead, she solved the problems they were having and established the facilities as planned. It didn't matter what difficulties she faced. She continually overcame them. By the time she died in 1917, at age 67, she had founded more than 70 hospitals, schools, and orphanages in the United States, Spain, France, England, and South America. Cabrini's impact was incredible. She was the Mother Teresa of her day, possessing similar compassion, grit, tenacity, and leadership. But she never would have made a difference if she had allowed her past to hold her hostage. Instead of lamenting the loss of her dream and thus the hurts of her youth, she moved on and did what she could where God put her. My hope is that you can too. Your 7th step to failing forward. Say goodbye to yesterday. To move forward today, you must learn to say goodbye to yesterday's hurts, tragedies, and baggage. You can't build a monument to past problems and fail forward. Take the time right now to list the negative events from your past that may be holding you hostage. For each item you listed, go through the following process. 1. Acknowledge the pain. 2. Grieve the loss. 3. Forgive the person. 4. Forgive yourself. 5. Determine to release the event and move on. If you are having a hard time because you're holding grudges, talk to God about the issue and ask Him to help you through the process. No matter how difficult this becomes, you must persevere through it. You will not be able to be your best self today until you say goodbye to yesterday. Steps to failing forward. 1. Realize there is one major difference between average people and achieving people. 2. Learn a new definition of failure. 3. Remove the you from failure. 4. Take action and reduce your fear. 5. Change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. 6. Don't let the failure from outside of you get inside of you. 7. Say goodbye to yesterday. 8. Who is this person making these mistakes? Failure is the greatest opportunity I have to know who I really am. John Killinger. Sometimes great achievement can come only as the result of a period of failure that helps you understand who you really are. That was the case for John James Audubon, the man for whom the National Audubon Society was named. His life was one of extremes, problems and progress, struggle and success, failure and fanfare. Here's the story. Audubon's beginnings. The son of a French sea captain, Audubon was born in Haiti in 1785, but spent his formative years in France. He was educated as a gentleman, but was at best an indifferent student. Because of his lack of discipline, he was sent to military school at age 14, but he didn't flourish in that environment either. His real passion was hunting and drawing birds. At age 18, Audubon was sent to America. His father felt that opportunity lay in the New World. Audubon landed in Pennsylvania, and he moved into a house his father owned there. In his new surroundings, he honed his skill as a woodsman. He continued hunting and drawing wildlife, and it wasn't long before he met and developed a relationship with a neighboring family named the Bakewells. They had a significant impact on his life. First, he fell in love with one of the family's daughters, Lucy. Second, in 1807, he started working in the counting house of Benjamin Bakewell's import company. That was the start of what would become an abysmal career in business. A career in trade. Audubon's first venture, which dealt in indigo dye, was indicative of his performance. It lost him a small fortune. He worked at the import business for a while, but after meeting no success, Audubon decided to try his hand at retail. Through his father's connections, he hooked up with Ferdinand Rouser, a young French businessman, and the two men headed west to Louisville, Kentucky, on the banks of the Ohio River. They set up for business, but met with minimal success. Rozier possessed tenacity for trade, while Audubon displayed the qualities that marked his entire life: hunting skill, undisciplined curiosity, unfailing energy, and artistic power. While Rozier manned the counter in the shop, Audubon roamed the countryside hunting and bringing back birds to be drawn or served at the table. During that time, Audubon's favorite contributions to the business were his trips to Philadelphia and New York to purchase goods for the store because he had a chance to see the countryside. On one of those trips, he returned to Pennsylvania and married Lucy Bakewell and took her back to Louisville with him. The partners worked together for a while, but it wasn't long before the business was in trouble, financially. To raise the needed money, Audubon sold Lucy's share of her family's estate and paid off the creditors. Making changes. The partners then decided that a new location would help them, and they went downstream to Henderson, Kentucky. They lasted 6 months there and made another change in location, this time to the banks of the Mississippi River. After much difficulty, they set up shop in Strait Genevieve, Missouri, a settlement of the French Canadians. As before, Audubon wasn't content with the business of trade and spent most of his time hunting birds, then drawing and painting them. After a short time, he sold his share in the shop, and the two partners went their separate ways. Rozier kept the business and became highly successful. Audubon went in search of another opportunity. Audubon's biographer, John Chancellor, asserted, Audubon believed that he should persevere in commerce, and that shooting, mounting, and drawing birds should remain an all-observing hobby. More failures. Over the next 10 years, Audubon embarked on a series of unsuccessful ventures. In 1811, he decided to return to the import business. He and his brother-in-law, Thomas Woodhouse Bakewell, established a commission house in New Orleans, importing goods from England. Unfortunately, they did on the eve of the War of 1812. Of course, their business failed. Audubon and his brother-in-law went back to work in trading goods, again in Henderson, Kentucky. They saw some success there, but then they made another poor business decision. They chose to open a steam sawmill and grist mill in an area that could not support such an operation. By 1819, they had gone bankrupt. All through the years, two things remained constant in Audubon's life: hunting and art. Now, he had to rely on both to survive. His gun put food on the table for his small family. He and Lucy had 2 young boys by then, and he drew portraits on commission to bring in money. By default rather than design, his hobby became his means of support. Finally, the right kind of change. In 1820, Audubon had what he called his great idea. He decided to create a comprehensive and complete printed collection of all American birds based on his paintings. They would be life-size and shown in their natural surroundings. For the next few years, he traveled and added more painted birds to his portfolio, where Lucy worked as a tutor and governess in Louisiana. By 1826, he had enough material. Audubon sailed to Liverpool, England, and immediately met with great success. He wrote back to his wife Lucy, "I am well received everywhere, my works praised and admired, and my poor heart is at the last relieved from the great anxiety that has for so many years agitated it. For I know now that I have not worked in vain." Guys, go ahead and visit www.patreon.com/MidSouthChasing. I'm trying to raise $100,000. So go on Patreon, don't be a fucking bum. And now we're back to the book. Audubon became associated with engraver Robert Harvell, and together they began painting the remarkable birds of America, a series of 100 color plates in a large 29 by 39-inch format. Audubon wrote of the effort, Who would believe that a lonely individual who landed in England without a friend in the whole country and with only sufficient pecuniary means to travel through it as a visitor could have accomplished such a task as this publication? The publication of his book finally gave him some financial security, and it made him famous all over Europe and the United States. Nothing else like it had ever been created, nor any other book of print since so revered. In all, they printed about 200 copies of the first edition. Today, it is considered a masterpiece, an original Birds of America, which sold for $1,000 in 1820s, is now worth $5 million. The problem was him. John James Audubon was unsuccessful for most of his life. It took him until he was 35 years old to figure out what his problem was. Himself. He was a terrible businessman, and he didn't belong in trade. It didn't matter how many times he changed locations, partners, or business types. Not until he understood and changed himself did he have a chance at success. For years, this saying could have applied to him. If you could kick the person most responsible for your troubles, you would not be able to sit down for weeks. Evangelist D.L. Moody was once asked which people gave him the most trouble. His response was, "I've had more trouble with Dwight L. Moody than any other man alive." Television host Jack Parr echoed that same thought. Looking back, my life seems to be one long obstacle race, with me as its chief obstacle. If you are continually experiencing trouble or facing obstacles, then you should check to make sure that you're not the problem. Why won't people change? People don't like to admit that they need to change. And if they're willing to alter things about themselves, they usually focus on cosmetic changes. Perhaps that's why Emerson said, "People are always getting ready to live, but never living." Yet anyone who wants to live in a better world needs to be willing to change himself. Psychiatrist Rudolf Drakers, director of the Alfred Adler Institute of Chicago, observed, "We can change our whole life and the attitude of people around us by simply changing ourselves." Why are people so hesitant to change? I believe that some, like Audubon, believe they're supposed to pursue a particular course of action for some reason, even though it doesn't suit their gifts and talents. And when they are not working in areas of strength, they do poorly. Others are not self-aware and don't even know what their strengths are. As Ben Franklin noted, there are 3 things extremely hard: steal, a diamond, and to know oneself. Still, others hinder themselves. I read an article about a 19th century French champion named Alexandre Deschapelles. He was a great chess player who quickly became the champion in his region. But when competition got tough, he decided that he would play an opponent only if the person would remove one of Deschapelles' pawns and then make the first move. That way, he would not look bad no matter what happened. If he lost, he could say that he had been at a disadvantage. If he won, he would seem that much more talented. Today, psychologists call that mindset the Deschapelles coup. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. Psychologist Sheldon Kopf says, all of the significant battles are waged within the self. That's true. People wage the greatest battles against their own flaws and failures. For years, John James Audubon must have regarded his desire to grab his gun and sketch pad and disappear into the woods as a fatal flaw because he thought he should be running a business. But when he realized that his gun and notepad were the tools of the business, everything became clearer in his mind. Successful television producer and film director Gary Marshall, a self-described late bloomer, has experienced more than his share of failures. You're probably familiar with some of his successes. The movie Pretty Woman and television's Odd Couple, Laverne and Shirley in Happy Days. But chances are you don't remember some of his other efforts, such as Blansky's Beauties and Me and the Chimp. They were bombs. Most people try to beat down their flaws or deny them altogether, notes Marshall. I've always found it best to say, here are the flaws. Now I have to find something I'm good at. Don't use your flaws as an excuse to quit. Move forward or sideways. Moving forward or sideways. The character John Valjean in Victor Hugo's Les Miserables declared, "It is nothing to die. It is an awful thing to have never lived." That's why it's for people who deny their internal flaws, bury them, and then try to pretend that they don't exist. To have an opportunity to reach your potential, you must know who you are and face your flaws. Allow me to help you do that. Go through the following process. 1. See yourself clearly. Bishop Fulton Sheen offered this insight. Most of us do not like to look inside ourselves for the same reason we don't like to open a letter that has bad news. Many people see all the bad and deny the good, or they'll see all the good and deny the bad. To reach your potential, you must see both. 2. Admit your flaws honestly. In Chapter 5, I stated that you must take responsibility for your actions to fail forward. But you must also take responsibility for who you are as a person. That means owning up to what you cannot do based on skill, should not do based on talent, and ought not do based on character. That's not always easy to do. 3. Discover your strengths joyfully. Working on your strengths is the next step in the process. No one ever achieved his dreams working outside of his areas of gifting. To excel, do what you do well. 4. Build on those strengths passionately. Like Audubon, you will improve only if you enthusiastically develop your God-given abilities. You can reach your potential tomorrow if you dedicate yourself to growth today. Remember, to change your world, you must first change yourself. Who is this person? One of the greatest stories of change I know personally, someone very close to me in my organization, the Enjoy Group. As I worked on this book, I was thinking about whose story I should tell in this chapter. My assistant, Linda Eggers, suggested that maybe her story would help you understand the impact of changing yourself that you can make on your life. If you've never heard me speak in person, then you've probably heard me talk about Linda. I believe that Linda is the finest executive assistant in the country, but I haven't always felt that way about her. A few years ago, we experienced a rocky time in our history, and the fact that we work together now is a strong testament to her willingness and ability to take a hard look at herself, make some changes in her life, and become the kind of person she desired to be. To excel, Do what you do well. Linda began working for me in the mid-1980s when I was leading Skyline Church in San Diego as its senior pastor. She had a job in the financial office with Steve Babby, our CFO. It was also about that time that I informed the Enjoy group with the help of my good friend Dick Peterson. Back then, we functioned on a shoestring, and our staff consisted of a handful of volunteers, including Linda and her husband, Patrick, helping to build the team. After Linda had been working with me for a while, I invited her to attend a new conference I was teaching in Southern California. During the course of that conference, Linda realized that she felt called to work with me at Enjoy, helping me to equip pastors to become better leaders. She approached me after the conference and shared her thoughts with me. Later, when Enjoy was big enough, we brought her on staff. Linda immediately became an impact player for us under the leadership of Dick Peterson, now the COO of the Enjoy Group and president of the Enjoy Conferences and Resources. Linda did whatever was asked of her, and that was just about everything. She managed the office, hired staff, performed accounting tasks, and even assisted with product development. As we grew, she took on greater and greater responsibility. By the early 1990s, she was Dick's right hand. Then suddenly, one day, Linda quit. She gave 2 weeks' notice and she was gone. She didn't give any explanation. She simply bailed on us. Dick and I were shocked. After a few weeks later, I found out that Linda had gone to work for an accountant friend of mine as his secretary. I was amazed because she had always been passionate about the kind of work we did. I couldn't see her being happy merely typing letters and doing simple data entry. Then something even more surprising happened. I heard that Linda was becoming very negative about me and Enjoy. She wasn't being malicious, but her comments were inappropriate. And that saddened me because I always liked her. Meanwhile, life went on. Dick hired someone else to replace Linda, and the company continued its growth. About 8 months later, I got a phone call telling me Linda wanted to see me. On the day she came to my office, she was shaking. And as she talked, she started to cry. She apologized for all the negative things she had been saying. Then she told me why she quit and what led to her feelings of bitterness. I was working so hard and so many hours, Linda said, that it was killing me. I thought nobody cared, and I realize now that I should have gone to Dick or come to you and told you how I was feeling. But I was in performance mode, and I was too proud to cry uncle. Then I started the pity me party. John, I am very sorry. Linda went on to say that it only took her a month at her new job to realize she had made a big mistake and she should have stayed and enjoy. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know. I'm not going to stay where I am because I've handled that poorly too. I guess I'm going to look for a job. Would you ever think about coming back to Enjoy? I asked. Do you think you could trust me again? She replied. I don't know, I said. Later that day, Dick told me that Linda had met and apologized to him. She also apologized to her current employer. Dick and I talked about it, and he offered to hire her back. But it would be in a different capacity. The only thing available at the time was a position taking incoming calls and answering correspondence. It must have been difficult for Linda, who had once been Dick's second in command, but she accepted. For 3 years, Linda worked hard and did everything asked of her with excellence and a positive attitude. And over time, she began to assist Dick more and more, helping make a difference. When I left the pastorate at Skyline in 1995 to devote myself to the Enjoy group, I knew I needed to hire a new assistant. And one of the only people I considered was Linda. I knew she was highly competent. The only issue I needed to settle was whether I could trust her unconditionally. An executive assistant who works with me has to be capable of running my life, dealing with sensitive and personal information about me and my family, and representing me well with everyone. It didn't take me long to settle the issue. I knew I wanted Linda to be my assistant. Since that day, I've never looked back or doubted her. In fact, if she hadn't courageously suggested I tell her story, it would have never occurred to me to share it. After Linda started working with me again, she told me something interesting. From the early days when I worked at Skyline back in '86, she said, I always believed that someday I would be your assistant, and to think that I almost blew it. The turning point for me was the day I looked at myself in the mirror and realized that I needed to make some changes in my life, starting with my attitude. If I hadn't, I would have never gotten the opportunity to do the work that I believe God wants me here to do. Today, Linda is awesome. I marvel at what she is capable of doing, and every time I make a positive impact on anyone with a conference or a book, she is a part of it. I wouldn't trade her for anyone else in the world. As you read this, if you are not happy with your current job, family situation, or life, look first at what you can change in yourself before trying to alter your circumstances. And recognize this: not realizing what you want is a problem of knowledge. Not pursuing what you want is a problem of motivation. Not achieving what you want is a problem of persistence. If you know who you are, make the changes you must make in order to learn and grow. And then give everything you've got to your dreams. You can achieve anything your heart desires. Your 8th step towards failing forward. Change yourself and the world changes. Sam Peoples Jr. says, the circumstances of life, the events of life, and the people around me in life do not make me the way I am, but reveal the way I am. Take some time to discover who you are by examining your weaknesses and your strengths. First, list any evident weaknesses or flaws. Weakness requires change. If something you listed falls into the category of attitude or character, you need to do an about-face. As Linda Eggers did, it may require an apology, restitution, or changes in lifestyle. If a weakness you listed has to do with an absence of talent or skill, then you may need to make adjustments in your priorities, goals, or career. Now, think about your strengths. List the gifts, talents, opportunities, and resources you possess. My strengths, my skills, my opportunities, and my resources. Develop a plan that will allow you to build on the strengths and maximize your potential. Remember, you cannot change unless you change within. Change yourself and the whole world changes. Steps to failing forward. 1. Realize there is one major difference between average people and achieving people. 2. Learn a new definition of failure. 3. Remove the you from failure. 4. Take action and reduce your fear. 5. Change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. 6. Don't let the failure from outside of you get inside of you. 7. Say goodbye to yesterday. 8. Change yourself and the world changes. 9. Get over yourself. Everyone else has. Don't get stuck inside your own ego, because it will become a prison in no time flat. Barbara Ward. People who desire to fail forward must turn their attention away from themselves and towards helping others. You could call that process getting over yourself. A few years ago, I saw a wonderful movie called Mr. Holland's Opus that beautifully illustrated the whole process. It started as a thank you. The movie was written by screenwriter Patrick Sheen Duncan, who came up with the idea one day while stuck in a traffic jam. He heard a report on the radio about the cutbacks in the school programs and a number of teachers in the state of California. Suddenly, I realized how many of my own teachers had been in my life, says Duncan, and that the most important thing we can do as adults is educate our children. Duncan remembered that the one special teacher who made a difference in his life. She was reputed to be the meanest and tougher teacher at the junior high school. But she was the one who brought me my books and gave me her own son's clothing after he'd grown out of them. Mr. Holland's Opus is a tribute to her and everyone else in her grand profession. One Man's Journey. The movie is the story of Glenn Holland, played by Richard Dreyfuss, a young musician who desires to make it to the big time as a composer. But when money gets tight and he needs to take care of his family, he reluctantly seeks employment as a teacher. That job, which he takes on only a temporary basis, becomes his life. Through the course of the movie, he discovered that he wants to share his love for music with his students, and in the process, he discovers himself. The pivotal point of the movie comes when Mr. Holland, his teaching position is eliminated because of the cutbacks. He suddenly realizes that he has reached his middle age. In that moment, he knows that he has forever missed his chance to pull up roots, go to New York, and take his symphony with him, which has been writing in his spare moments for the last 20 years. Despondent and feeling rejected, he believes that he has wasted his life. He is depressed and on the verge of bitterness. As he leaves his classroom, he ambles dejectedly down the hill, preparing to walk out of the school for the last time. That's when he hears something in the auditorium. When he checks to see what it is, he discovers dozens and dozens of students whose lives he had changed during all his years of teaching. That group even includes the governor of the state, who took a major turn for the better understanding of his mentoring. An ordinary man doing something extraordinary. The director of the movie, Stephen Herrick, was attracted to Mr. Holland's Opus because the screenplay touched him. It made me cry, he admitted. Very rarely do I read something where I actually end up with the tears flowing freely, but that is how I felt at the end of the script. The story makes a hero out of an everyman who just happens to be a teacher, which I think is a very important thing to do. It is also a story about how one human being can affect a lot of other people and touch their lives in a very special way. Many people believe that touching the lives of others can be done only by some elite group of specially gifted people. But that's not the case. Any ordinary person, just like Glenn Holland in the movie, can make a positive impact on the lives of others. Some unsuccessful people tell themselves that as soon as they achieve considerable success or discover some unseen talent, they will turn their attention to making a difference in the lives of others. But I have news for them. Many people who struggle with chronic failure do so because they think no one but themselves. They worry about what other people think of them. They scramble to make sure no one gets the better of them. They continually focus on protecting their turf. Years ago, I read an article about the New York Yankees manager, Billy Martin, that described him as a person who acted that way. The author said that in his later years, the former ball player spent much of his energy second-guessing supposed enemies and foiling imaginary plots against him. I don't know to what extent that is true, but I do know this. Martin was hired and fired from his position in Yankees manager 5 times. My dad loves to tell jokes, and the cornier they are, the better he likes them. I recall going to an NFL ball game with him in San Diego, and as the Chargers huddled up, he leaned over to me and said, "John, did you hear about the guy who's going to quit football games?" Every time the team huddled up, he thought they were talking about him. If you continually focus all of your energy and attention on yourself, I have a message for you. Get over yourself, because everyone else has. If you have a history of repeated failure, and you dedicate most of your time and energy looking out for number 1, you may need to learn a new way of thinking, where others come first. If you suspect that a selfish streak is preventing you from achieving your goals and dreams, you may need to change and improve your approach to success. Stop focusing on yourself. First, you need to think about others rather than yourself. A major cause of negative thinking and poor mental health is self-absorption. Selfishness ultimately hurts not only the people around a self-focused person, but the selfish person himself. It inclines the person towards failure because it keeps him in a negative mental rut. That is the reason that Dr. Carl Menninger responded the way he did when someone asked, "What would you advise a person to do if he felt a nervous breakdown coming on?" Most people expected him to reply, "Consult a psychiatrist," since that was his profession. To their astonishment, Menninger replied, "Lock up your house, go across the railway tracks, find someone in need, and do something to help that person." My friend Kevin Myers points out that most people are too insecure to give anything away. I believe that's true. Most people who focus all their attention on themselves feel that they're missing something in their lives, so they're trying to get it back. For example, here are some needs and the common side effects that occur when they are missing. Break. Don't miss the opportunity to miss out in life. Donate to my Patreon at patreon.com/MidSouthChasing. If you don't donate and you don't care about this education, then you're not furthering the cause of literacy in the world. And break. Inner need, belonging, worth, competence, purpose. If missing, I feel insecure, inferior, inadequate, insignificant. Developing a given spirit, as Menninger implied, helps a person to overcome some feelings of deficiency in a positive and healthy way. That's why Menninger believed that the generous people are rarely mentally ill people. A person is less likely to focus on himself if he is trying to help someone else. Stop taking yourself so seriously. In my seminars, I work with a lot of leaders, and I found that many of them take themselves much too seriously. Of course, they are not alone. I meet people in every walk of life who have too much doom and gloom in their attitudes. They need to lighten up. No matter how serious your work is, that's no reason to take yourself seriously. A few weeks ago, I was in Australia teaching leadership to a group of several thousand business people, and I was talking to them about how most of us think that we are more important than we really are. I told everyone that on the day that I die, one of my good pastor friends will give me a wonderful eulogy and tell some funny stories about me. But 20 minutes later, the most important thing he'll have on his mind will be trying to find the potato salad at my reception. You have to have a sense of humor about these things, especially if you work with people. Comedian Victor Borge summed it up. Laughter is the shortest distance between two people. If any person had a reason to take his job and himself seriously, it is the President of the United States. Yet, it's possible for even people holding that position to maintain their sense of humor and keep their egos in check. For example, when Calvin Coolidge was asked if he would attend the Sesquicentennial Exposition in Philadelphia, the president answered yes. "Why are you going, Mr. President?" a reporter asked. "As an exhibit," answered Coolidge. More recently, when George Bush was told that a company would be selling a set of presidential trading cards for kids, his response was, "I don't dare ask how many hundreds of George Bush cards you have to trade to get one Michael Jordan." If you take yourself too seriously, give yourself and everyone else around you a break. Recognize that laughter breeds resilience. Start putting the team first. If you follow sports these days, you've heard a lot of talk about the selfishness of professional athletes. The recent criticism has been especially harsh towards pro basketball players because the feeling is that too many players perverse a me-first mentality. Critics often point to the difference in performance between the men's and women's basketball teams in the 1996 Olympics. The amount of talent on the men's team far outweighed that of their opponents, yet the players sometimes found it difficult to play together as a team. Meanwhile, the women virtually defined teamwork with their performance. When competition is fierce, selfishness makes it almost impossible for a team to win. It ultimately produces failure. If talent alone won championships, then the Los Angeles Lakers of the late 1990s would have earned one. Fortunately, all of the stories out of the NBA aren't about selfishness and failure. The 1999 NBA champions, the San Antonio Spurs, won their victory because the man who had been their best player for a decade knew the importance of getting over himself. Standing at 7 feet 1 inch, David Robinson is at the center for the Spurs. In his 10 years for the NBA, Robinson has earned just about every type of award there is for a professional basketball player. Rookie of the Year, 1990. Rebounding Champion, 1991. Defensive Player of the Year, 1992. Number 1 Shot Blocker, 1992. Number 1 Scorer, 1994. And Most Valuable Player, 1995. He has also been named to the NBA All-Star Team 8 times. His consistently excellent play has put him in the upper echelon statistically in several all-time NBA categories, including points scored per game. He has been named one of the 50 greatest players in NBA history. Despite all of Robinson's personal achievements, he had never won an NBA championship until the 1999 season. How did he do it? By giving up the ball offensively and allowing another player, Tim Duncan, to be the hero. During the 1999 playoffs, teammate Avery Johnson commented, "What we have in David Robinson is the ultimate team player, the ultimate winner. He threw his ego out and became a totally different player for the good of the team. He could still average 25 points, but where would we be without him?" In 1999, Robinson put up the lowest averages of his career. His viewpoint was this: "I looked at our team and realized we needed to be more defensive and rebounded binding. To be a complete team, both of us did not need to score. Some nights I might, but it's Tim's team, and I'm fine with that." The result of Robinson's unselfish ability to put the team ahead of himself was success for everyone's team. If you want to win and overcome failure, you've got to get over yourself. Start adding value to others continually. When people think about you, do they say to themselves, "My life is better because of that person," or "My life is worse"? Their response probably answers the question of whether you are adding value to them. Since we moved to Atlanta a few years ago, we've made some new friends named Howard and Doris Bowen. Not long ago, my wife Margaret and I attended a party for Doris. A lot of people attended that party because of the positive impact she'd had on their lives. As we sat listening, person after person stood up to talk about the difference she had made in his or her life. Doris is an extra mile person. After I had a heart attack in December, there came a time when I had to go to the hospital all days for tests. Doris dropped everything to spend that nerve-wracking day with Margaret, even though we'd only just met her. Doris is always doing that kind of thing for others. She's a wonderful friend. After all the people at the party told Doris about how much she meant to them, she stood up and said, "All my life I've wanted people to feel like they were better for knowing me. Thank you for making me feel like I've made a difference." To succeed personally, you must try to help others. That's why my friend Zig Ziglar says, you can't get everything in life you want if you help enough people get what they want. How do you do that? How can you turn your focus from yourself and start adding value to others? You can do it by 1. Putting others first in your thinking. When you meet people, is your first thought about what they'll think of you or how you can make them feel more comfortable? At work, do you try to make your coworkers or employers look good, or are you more concerned about making sure that you receive your share of the credit? When you interact with family members, whose best interests do you have in mind? Your answers show where your heart is. To add value to others, you need to start putting others ahead of yourself in your mind and in your heart. If you can do it there, you will be able to put them first in your actions. When you know people's values, then you can add value to them.